got some breaking news which is coming in. At the moment, it's Big India Today scoop on the crash investigative report. India Today has confirmed news. Pilots tried to fix the engine shutdown. Pilots tried to bring the fuel switch to run. The report also points to us the fact one engine recovered, but the second did not. Is this more proof of a technical fault? This is something which India Today can tell you at the moment. What is confirmed is that the pilots tried very hard to fix the engine shutdown. The pilots tried to bring the fuel switch back to the run mode. One engine recovered, the second did not. Is this proof for a technical fault? More proof, in fact, that there was indeed a technical glitch that took place. And that's the reason why this unfortunate crash happened on the 12th of June. My colleague Nagarjun still with me on the story. Nagarjun, this is big news which is coming in. India Today can confirm it that the pilots tried very hard. They tried to move the switches back to the run mode. One of the engines recovered, the other one did not.
Well, that's true because the aircraft was already in the stall position. Even after the engine came on, if then the fuel entered the engine, one engine was recovered and thrust was formed, but it was too little too late. The aircraft was already on a high altitude nose and the aircraft was stalling and gradually losing height, and that hardly reached 600 to 800 feet after takeoff. It was too little too late. The other engine didn't even recover, and hence the crash happened is what we are told. If this aeroplane or the aircraft was at maybe 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet or 5,000 feet, maybe the pilots could have had more time. By the time the engine could have recovered, even one engine with maximum capacity would have taken off quite well is what we are told. So it was too little too late, but the pilots did try to put the switch back on to run position and the fuel did enter the engine, but it was unfortunately too little too late.
Nagarjun, please stay on with me. Coming to you now, Vandana. Do you believe it's high time that not just India but the world need to ask questions from Boeing?
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with firstly both the panelists. 32 seconds and it's over. What happened in those 4 seconds? Why was there just an advisory, and then why was it not made mandatory? Why were the checks not done? There are a lot of whys that need to be answered over here. Electrical software malfunction, was the FedEx operating system now, which is going to be investigated more deeply into, would be done. So there are lots of things to it, and I think this global tragedy that has happened, national tragedy that has happened, we need to have answers to this. And it's high time that all the stakeholders, which includes Boeing, needs to answer all these questions to us. We cannot just leave it to no accountability. There are so many human lives that have been lost. 260 have been lost, and somebody has to be held accountable for this. And here we see Pilot 1 asking Pilot 2, and clearly they are trying their best. But don't forget, this is just at 625 feet. What could they do in those few seconds? They were just trying to take the lift, the height to at least 1,500 or 2,000 feet to try to stabilize and then look into this. But what could they do? There was hardly any time, and this aircraft met with such catastrophe. So this is really sad, and I do feel that we need answers, and the answers will come out. Over to you.
Right. Saurabh, coming to you now, questions obviously, just as Vandana at the moment pointed out, that there are a lot of whys which now need to be answered, and also the very crucial thing which most of the people at the moment are pointing towards is the fact that the engine failure happened barely after the takeoff. The pilots had nothing much to do, and India Today can confirm to you that the pilots tried their level best. They somehow were able to retrieve the first engine, the second engine, unfortunately, they were not able to retrieve the second engine.
Yeah, absolutely. Pilot will always try to do the level best to save the aircraft and to fly the aircraft. The only thing fact remains that it happened just 3 seconds after the liftoff. Okay, that is 080839 seconds the liftoff happened, and 080842 there was a first. What is troubling to see is that the report says that the fuel cutoff switch transition, that means the switch itself transitioned from run to off. Had the report said the fuel shut-off valve is closed or commanded closed, that could have been, still, there's electrical failure or something of that sort. So there has to be a lot of answers the Boeing has to do, because no pilot in its sane condition will do that immediately, because immediately after takeoff, 7 to 8 seconds, there a first call which the pilot monitoring gives is the positive rate, and the pilot flying says gear up. In this case, there was no call. The CVR, obviously they did not release it. So there was no, and because the landing gear lever was found down, the flap was in correct position, that means they got something called the startled effect, that why the engine spooling. You get to hear, okay, the one thing, it's the first reaction will be the moment you get, there will be a very discernible noise of engines winding down. The moment engine wind down both the engines together, the first call will be, why did you shift? The only thing pilot will do with so many of flying hours experience is that it has to be fuel cutoff switches or a fuel shut off valve failure or this thing. So that is the first effect. But thereafter the CVR is silent. AIB didn't release the thing. So no pilot in a good condition and a sane condition
Right.
will put the commanded, because it's a manually controlled switch. It is not electric. It's a manually, you have to put it off and put it on with a spring loaded. It could just can't slide like that.
Right. Nagarjun, coming to you now, the question that a lot of people at the moment are asking, how much can the pilot actually control if something like this goes wrong? Does the pilot have a lot of safety measures, a lot of checks in place to somehow save the crash from happening, to save the plane?
Well, there are emergencies checklists that pilots also follow, but that happens usually if the mid-air engine failure happens. The aircraft is cruising at 35,000, 40,000 feet, so they always have some time. But in this situation, this was done, or it happened just moments, seconds after the takeoff. So even going through the checklist was not possible, because in matter of seconds you would be crashing down. Of course, the pilots have checklists for not just for emergencies. Even just before takeoff, they do their own checklist before taxiing, before pushback, and after they land, when they are the parking bay. There is a series of checklists depending on aircraft to aircraft, manufacturer to manufacturer, which is prescribed, and it is compulsory that they go through this checklist. Both pilot flying and pilot monitoring will have to go through this checklist stepwise before they reach a stage. So once landing is done, there has a checklist. Once takeoff is done, there's a checklist. Once before taxiing, after taxiing, there's a checklist. So emergency also, there are different kind of checklists. Thus, usually the aircraft manufacturers prescribe in terms of engine failure, in terms of bird hit, in terms of hydraulic failure, electrical failure. There is a series of protocols that the manufacturers prescribe to follow, so that the aircraft could be handled well in the emergency situations. But in this, of course, there would be a checklist for when both engines fail. You have to just glide through the air, and hopefully that you have a sufficient space to land, and or do a belly landing if there's a river body or a water body there. And that's the prescribe, because you don't have any power. You're just sinking every second. At 600, 700 feet, they hardly had any more time apart from mayday call that they could do, because the aircraft was in stalling position and not even a gliding position, and they had to just lose height and crash. Seems like, whatever minimal information given out by the report, that the pilots did try to follow the checklist and try to put the switch back to run, but it was too late.
Right, Nagarjun.